It has been just over 3 years since Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission finished its work, including the publications of its call to action. HSAA has been exploring our role as treaty peoples on colonized lands, including training of our board, our staff, our activists at Blue Quill University, buildings that were once residential schools just outside of the town of St. Paul. We proudly fly the flags of our treaty partners, as well as the Métis Nations, at our office. The trek that begins today will wrap up in 2 weeks at our Calgary office, is the next step in helping us to understand our truth on this land. One of our board members who have liked to have been on this trek lovingly calls this HSAA's call to participation. We wanted to send off our walkers with a bit of a ceremony before they leave us to begin on their journey, and to guide us through this, the Northern District Board member, Mr. Scott McDougall, is right beside me. There we go. Come on up, Scott. Yep. You can have that one. Yep. Hey, hang on.
Thanks, members. Before we start, I'd just like to introduce one of my friends and family members, Dr. Pat Makokas. She taught many years at Blue Quills with us, and also at the Extension faculty at the University of Alberta. To give a little backdrop, the Social Justice Committee every once in a while takes on a big project, sometimes way bigger than any of us imagined. When Mike talks about countless hours, it truly has been that. This year, as a big project, we decided to really examine our role as settlers in our relationship with Indigenous people. Of all the unions in Canada that I know of, HSAA, through some of the leadership Mike has provided, has been at the forefront of really having us start to understand and connect as fellow human beings. So this project emanated out of the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, and one of the things that we began talking about right at the beginning of the year was that it's very nice to see that every time we gather, we make some acknowledgement. But acknowledgement is only one piece, and the action piece that Mike talked about is what the committee also talked about, is how are we going to do this. The good fortune is that Pat had an experience doing a similar walk for Bill 262 that Romeo Saganash had put out to ensure that the future laws in Canada are respecting the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And so we were able to tap in with Steve and his practicum student, Allegra, who did an amazing amount of work along with us to see that this day was going to start in a good way. Going on that, we took the hefty objective of doing this walk from here to Calgary with the view of stopping in communities all along the way to engage our fellow unionists, and
This is for you.
Okay, Scott. Okay.
and other citizens in this important dialogue. One of the leaders who set us off on this journey and ceremony is another friend, Vin de Steinauer. Today is his birthday. Unfortunately, he passed away suddenly a few months ago. So we're honoring that as much as anything, that we've started this process of us as settler people starting to understand the Indigenous story in a more profound way. I think we need to understand that us as settlers also benefit from what should have been done 300 years ago when the treaty was signed, that talked about us walking a parallel path together, of sharing knowledge with each other, of sharing the land with each other, of gathering more expertise than just a single orientation. So with that, I personally want to thank the membership for their generosity, for their the emails that we've received of encouragement. And I think you're proving as health science practitioners that we're no longer satisfied with the disproportionate impact on the social determinants of health that we see among the Indigenous people that we serve on a regular basis. Hopefully, this becomes the start of larger dialogues that we encourage other unions to take a similar position and really honestly make an action component out of truth and reconciliation. I'd like to pass it over to Pat just for a few words. Thank you.
Wow, my dear friend Scott, I thank him. Never in my life would I ever believe that I would be standing before a group of folks that, as I sat here this morning listening to your Vice President, Trudy, she said that we need to take a stand on the things that really matter. Well, I would suggest to you that treaties matter because we all benefit from those treaties. And that I want to start by sharing a story with you. I've taught for many, many years, and over those years of teaching, what I have come to know very, very clearly as I read papers, even as of last week, this week actually, what I do know, and I'm 100% confident in saying this, is that not one of us in this room learned the true history of Indigenous people in Canada, on these lands. We never learned that. And as we never learned that, we have not had an opportunity to truly get to know each other. Many years ago, probably 15 at least, I was teaching and doing professional development at Blue Quills, and there was a white man, and I will call him a white family member. We had worked with that group for about probably 4 different sessions, and we were doing our last closing circle. And this older white man started to cry, and he broke down and he said, "Why is it that I have a PhD in history and I do not know a thing about what you have taught me? And as a result of that, I've lost out. I've lost out, my children have lost out, my family has lost out, and I would suggest to you that every one of us in this room, we've all lost out. Because what I do know for sure is that historic trauma is rolling out every day in the lives of Indigenous people, and many of you on the front line see that every day. And that may create bias, and it may create stereotypes as we don't understand that history. I would encourage you to look at historic trauma, look at the research on adverse childhood experiences, the ACE work. That work comes out of a middle-class American major research project of over 17,000 people. And when you look at that research, we haven't even begun to explore the tip of the iceberg of Indigenous people in Canada and the health. So one of my mentors, Dr. Diana Steinhauer, who is in here, in this room, who I acknowledge for somebody who I have the greatest of respect for, because she has, I feel like I'm a baby in kindergarten in terms of learning what it is to be Cree. And instead of talking about races and talking about divisiveness, we are called in our own teachings to come to understand each other as families. Red family, yellow family, black family, white family. And when I think about that man with the PhD, he's my white brother. And when he learned this history and he learned how deeply it's impacting us in this country, you would see that on the front lines. And so I ask you with an open mind and an open heart, please, please start to learn the colonial history. But that colonial history is playing out today. It's playing out in the current policies of the federal government and the legislation that they're trying to roll out. Please look at what you're going to come to know as the White Paper 2.0. and the attempt to diminish the treaties. When I think about those treaties, I think about your ancestors and I think about my ancestors and how Indigenous people who love this land, who openly took your ancestors and welcomed them and agreed to share with an openness and to help. And that's a part of history we don't know. So please take a look at the treaty film. Come to understand that, because there's significant teachings in that. As long as the sun shines, you know, that we get to greet that every day, as long as waters flow. And the waters flow means as long as there are women, and women are giving birth, that we have this relationship, and as long as that grass grows. What I also heard was, you want a society that is just and fair. We want that too, and we deserve that. I have been more passionate now than I have ever been in my whole life, because I have a little grandson. He's 4 years old. When I think of my little grandson, Ateo, he's got braids. I think about those children in those residential schools whose hair was cut when they walked through. Ateo Kon Asini is my grandson's name. He was not going to become number 15 as he walked through that residential school, because that's really what happened in this country. Our children, as they walked through the door, if they were siblings, the girls went one way, the boys went one way, and Ateo Kon Asini, Spirit Rock, was no longer Spirit Rock. He became number 15. And when you do that, you dehumanize children. And then imagine, if you can, Edmonton. And as Edmonton, if all of your children and your grandchildren were lifted up, if a UFO came here and they lifted up all of your children, and all that's left are the parents and the old people, what would happen to Edmonton and to you? Because essentially, that's what happened in Canada. And none of us knew that, right? And so the sadness of that is that so much illness has happened. The average age, apparently, a project was done in Saddle Lake a number of years ago, 10 years ago, and the lifespan of a man was 47 years old, and this is 2019, so that would have been 2009. Women, it's 55. My brother, Vincent, who is my spiritual brother in terms of ceremony, he died at 55. When I listened this morning, I've never been to a meeting like this before, but what I have to believe is that you are going to live by what you're saying. Your speaker from Manitoba talked about mobilizing people. She talked about public engagement, and she talked about coalition building. We need you. I need you as my white family members, as my yellow family members, my black family members, to stand with us. Because I listened a number of years ago to Dr. Graham Smith, who's an Indigenous scholar from New Zealand, I believe. We were at UBC, and he said, "We are the ones of the world, but when you put the ones of the world, we are many." And I suggest to you that if you pull your families together and we pull our families together and we start learning about this history, we can have a better world for that, because we are all responsible for looking after Mother Earth. All you have to do is look around, and when you see the things happening, we believe in our ceremonies, in those elements. We know that we are related to them and we have respect for them. We do not control them. All you need to do right now is look and see what's happening, to know that we have to come together in this work. I want to end by sincerely thanking you. In my lifetime, I never would have thought that I would have the opportunity to come And I would ask you to think about me not as Dr. Makokis, but Cookum Pat. Cookum to my little Ateokan Asini, and as a servant leader, simply one Cookum, wanting to see a different quality of life for all of our children. All of our future is dependent upon us working together. I happen to have a son who's a physician, and he too would see first line, the front lines of what's going on in this country. I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I ask you, please, look at the federal legislation, critique it, and know that there's harm in harm's way if we don't get this right. Look at that white paper 2.0 and the legislation, and step in and help us and do the walk with us. I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and my brother Scott. Hi, hi.
So we'd just like to end this piece of the presentation with a couple of things. One is also to acknowledge a drummer that's here with us today, Lloyd Cardinal. Lloyd works as an Indigenous helper in the Catholic school system here in Edmonton, and you will hear a beautiful voice as we prepare to walk the room. We're going to just close this with a short 10-minute video presentation. Kim, if you can put that on. And again, thank you all. I will say this, that on the journey, we do certainly invite day walkers to join in the conversation, meet some people that you might not otherwise meet. If you go to the website, www.treatytalk.com, you will see the banner for Walk for Common Ground. So if you got the day off, if you're hanging out and feel like you want to do that, please feel free to join in on the day walking. All the departure times are there. If you want to participate in ceremony, it's usually a half an hour ahead of start, but we certainly welcome each and every one of you and your families to participate if you can. Thanks so much.
Before we get started, I've got a speaker on Pro Mic 4, please. Pro Mic 4, please.
Hi there. Again, Shane Whiteford. Did you guys miss me? So I just wanted to share some of my experiences being an Indigenous person. For the record, I am Cree, Irish, Ukrainian, and French. I am a
Can you
Canadian.
speak closer to the mic, Peter? Thank you.
Sorry, for the record, I'm Cree, Irish, Ukrainian, and French, and I am status. In 2003, the year that I graduated, only 10% of Indigenous people actually graduated high school, in comparison to 90% of the rest of Alberta. I did not learn about the history of my culture, my people, or what is coming about nowadays in school myself, and it was not passed on to me by elders, because they did not want to talk about it. Still, the education funding is only 50% per head for people on reserves, and I'm what happens when I'm in the Catholic school and I'm learning like the rest of you. I pay taxes, and I want to help others. When attending EMT school, I had a 3.96 GPA at an educational institute, which I will not name, and I was signed off by my main preceptor. Unfortunately, the reason it was given, we did a protocol deviation for him because I was messing up my blood pressures, just something simple. We corrected that. I was doing blood pressures on firefighters and other people. Of course, he corrected it. Apparently, it wasn't signed. And for that reason, I failed the course. They weren't going to wait for him to come back from, my secondary preceptor to come back from vacation to sign it, and I was forced to retake the entire course, just not practicum. So 2 weeks from there, I ended up moving and starting at Portage College in Lac La Biche. They understood why I was doing that. However, they encouraged me that you could fight out, but I knew that my career options would be limited if I did so. So I just wanted to share that information with you guys for how it actually is out there. I was successful in my dream job prior to going back to Slave Lake, and simply because of the color of my skin and even just half of where I come from, I was treated horribly.
Brother, our timer on the screen is broken. You have 30 seconds.
Okay, And that was it. All I want to say again is thank you for listening, and hi, hi.
Aye, aye. Mic number 1, please. Mic number 1, please.
I am oh, there we go. Gail Quisley. I just want to say that Alberta Health Services has a thing on my learning link about Indigenous awareness. It is compulsory to do the introduction, but there are 6 or 8 different sections, and I would encourage everybody to do those. I learned so much. It is an excellent, excellent course, or whatever you want to call it.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no speakers. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Scott and Lloyd, I believe, and I'm going to get out of your way.
So Kim, if we just want to roll that 10 minutes, and then at the end of that, Lloyd will start with one round of the honor song, and we'll make our way to the back. Thanks very much.
Could I get all of the walkers to please rise and begin your journey?
Can I get everybody else to stand up? We're gonna just sing an honor song. And I just wanted to explain that the song I'm gonna sing comes from Musqueam, from the Saddleback family. They're ceremonial people, and they gave us this song to sing. Before that, it came from Saskatchewan, and it's about 80 years old. And I just want you guys to understand that the drum signifies the heartbeat of Mother Earth, right? And I had an elder tell me one time that, you know, Mother Earth, like the same way that the rivers and the lakes, you know, travel through the earth, so does the blood in your veins, right? It's because Mother Earth is alive. Life is sacred, birth is sacred, and we begin in water. You know, so every child spends 9 months in their mother's womb, listening to the heartbeat of their mother. So that's what the drum signifies. And I'll give you an honor song now. All right, so here we go.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lloyd.